So
Okay.
Liz Fleming.
Elizabeth Fleming, if you want to throw the professional side of it.
And you said you're a licensed.
Licensed marriage family therapist. And my title is, ready?
Yeah.
Readjustment, VA readjustment therapist.
Alright.
Okay.
28 years, you said?
28 years with the United States Coast Guard.
So
And
you're
10
just-
years in mental health.
So you're just a person.
Oh, okay.
So, right on. Just got the background. So we came up with a couple of questions. I don't know if you have them looking at. Just to
Alright.
start off.
So,
you could just-
so pretty much as like an overview, how does someone like get post-traumatic stress disorder?
It first has to be an event or an incident that they actually either experience or witness or actually hear about from other persons. You know, there's what we call secondary post-traumatic stress. For example, a nurse or a fireman or a policeman
Yeah.
who don't necessarily experience the actual event but witness the results of it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's kind of how post-traumatic stress disorder comes out.
All right. And then, like, what effects could it take on, say, a veteran's life? Like, what would occur?
Well, what happens is the symptoms can appear almost instantly, or it may take up to 10 years. And the reason why it's called post-traumatic stress disorder is the first month of any kind of event is considered acute distress disorder in the DSM,
Okay.
which is the diagnostic,
Right,
you know.
DSM-4.
You got it. It's the manual for psychological disorders.
All right.
So basically, there's a little time piece that comes into play there. Like, for example, if 100 people experience an earthquake, okay, 75% of those people will not have symptoms after about a month. But the other 25 may have some sort of symptom that lasts up to 6 months after that, and that's when it's called post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, so some of the symptoms: nightmares, flashbacks, panic attacks, anxiety issues, depression, sometimes reliving the trauma event through triggers. It could be sleep disorders, can't sleep. Usually sleep average for most people with post-traumatic stress disorders 3 to 4 hours a night, maybe.
Is that like, would you say that it, like, they can't get to sleep, or it's just really interrupted sleep?
It could be any kind. It could be early insomnia, it could be middle insomnia, or it could be late insomnia, which is what you're talking about. Is somebody may be able to go sleep for like an hour, but they're having a nightmare and they wake up, or they hear a noise. That's another thing. They're very, very hyper vigilant, hyper arousal, easy. Ever had it like when you had a friend maybe had some sort of experience like in a car accident or anything, and you come up behind them and you touch them and they
Yeah.
fly up in the
Yeah.
air? That's a hypervigilance piece. A lot of your vets are like that. The guys that are coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan, they are, you know, if you picture in your mind, they're running around in these trucks and these Hummers, and it's like in a regular town. Well, you know, the orange bags that Caltrans leaves on the freeway,
Yeah.
when they see them, they see an IED, which is an explosive. So they tend not to want to drive, and they don't like overhead bridges because snipers were on the bridges. So a lot of your Iraqi, Afghanistan vets have a tendency to not want to drive, or if they do drive, they're like Granny in the left-hand lane, driving real slow and watching everything. Okay. So that's pretty much one of those. That's the
Yeah.
symptoms
Yeah.
of PTSD.
And by the triggers, like triggers, you mean it could be anything as a
Could be anything.
sounds or
Sounds.
Could be watching a movie.
That
Could
just
be,
bring it
here's a good example. I had a gentleman who's in the first part of the invasion of Iraq. And his trigger that started him flashing back were flies. Flies, he saw so many dead bodies. The flies that he saw reminded him of the dead bodies, and he went right back to flashing back to the desert. Other guys, heat, because it's so hot over there. Sand. You know, they don't go to the beach because there's sand. You know.
Yeah, I did a project on what happened at Columbine High School,
Yeah.
and they're still not allowed to have any balloons at all, just because
Right.
of the sound it makes.
Because of the sound and the noise. Biggest thing here, we have Fleet Week, where the Blue Angels come in.
yeah.
My Vietnam vets are still freaked out about the jets flying over. They still crawl underneath their coffee tables because they're afraid of inbound mortar attack. Okay? And these guys have been around for 40 years. War hasn't been around for a real long time, but they're still feeling the affects.
Yeah. So, how long can like a disorder be present in a person's life?
The rest of their life. PTSD exists the rest of your life. Just like everybody has anxiety and depressions, moments. These guys still have anxiety and depression, only theirs is a little more intense. Unless they get into therapy and unless they get on medications and they actually work through the piece, they can kind of get better management of it. Management. It doesn't go away, just manages it, okay? And a lot of them do. But they have to bring it up to their conscious level, because on the unconscious level, they react.
Mhm.
So if they're conscious of their things, then they can change it.
So what you're saying is that they could, with work, keep it under control, but it will
Absolutely.
never
No.
go away.
No.
Okay.
That's why the VA gives a lot of people permanent disability, because it does affect every aspect of your life, social and occupational. One of the other symptoms of PTSD is interpersonal relationships. They don't trust anybody. So can you imagine being married to somebody and not wanting to trust them? A lot of times they end up breaking up in their marriages, unless they have a really strong partner who really is very supportive and understands it. Then they're successful in their relationships. Another piece to it is, work, occupations. A lot of my more successful employed PTSD clients are people who get in jobs where they don't have a boss hanging over them. They hate authority figures. They don't do well with them.
Why is that? Just because like maybe a commander is giving orders?
Well, I think a lot of people with post-traumatic stress disorder will tell you that people call them control freaks because they have to be in control of their environment.
Yeah.
So if you have a boss who's always controlling you, he stresses you out. You don't want to be there. Because you always remember that post-traumatic stress disorder interferes with the fight, flight, and freeze system. Okay, so if a person feels threatened, they're either going to bag on you, or they're going to fight you, or they're going to freeze.
Yeah.
So if you think about, did any of you guys go to work? Have you ever been employed,
So,
you know,
Yeah. Well,
and doing some stuff? Okay, well, if your boss is very nitpicky and micromanaging, you really can't stand him. You know, like, get away from me, I could do this, okay? Well, can you imagine somebody who really is a control person, who gets really stressed out? They can't handle a job, so a lot of times what happens is they go into several jobs. A lot of my guys average my Vietnam guys probably average 40 to 50 jobs over 40 years. A lot of times jobs don't last more than a year.
and then, so how common is the disorder in veterans returning from this war in Iraq and
They
Afghanistan?
say about 40 to 50%.
40 to 50. Wow.
How severe do you think it is to be able
And the
to
reason
be
for that-
considered in that?
And the reason for that is they keep returning and going back. So the disorder gets reinforced over and over and over again. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And do you think they send it back because they feel that they're not in control anymore?
No,
Is that why they keep
no,
it,
it's
or
the,
is it
it's
just
the
as part
needs of the
supply?
service.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you guys are aware
Yeah.
of military service, but the human factor takes after the needs of the service. So if they need people over there, they order them to go back. A lot of times what they do, I know in Vietnam, everybody who did a year over in Vietnam, they didn't have to return. You know, it was on a volunteer basis only. But this particular war has got a lot of reserves in it. And the reserves may go over for maybe 4 or 5 months, but then they return and come home for 3 or 4 months, and then depending on their specialty, they might have to go back and do another 3 or 4 months. So they go back into the environment and they get re-traumatized over and over and over again.
Well, if someone's like diagnosed with PTSD, could they still have like a possibility of having to go back?
They have to be diagnosed.
But if they're diagnosed, they'll never come
No,
back.
they won't go back.
Right, okay.
No. But it has to be done by, you know, a professional, and there has to be a lot of paperwork that says, no, you can't go back. And then, here's the little click to that piece. If you have a PTSD, then you might be discharged from the service.
Is that bad? What does that mean?
Well, that could be in a lot of different things. The 9/11 GI Bill is really sweet. You get not only 4 years of tuition paid college, but you get to live on what they call a basic housing allowance of about $2,700 a month. A month,
That's a
living
lot.
on it.
Isn't it?
Yeah, that's good. I wish I had that when I went through. And it's a real sweet job. I mean, you know, deal for them. But in order to get that, first of all, if you're active duty, you have to have done 2 years of active duty in order to even get the GI Bill. As a reserve, you have to serve 1 year active duty in the war zone in order to really get that kind of sweet deal. So a lot of people, their motivation is not necessarily military service, but that education piece. Because that's a sweet scholarship, you know? And so a lot of guys are motivated to, oh no, I have to get back there and you know. So a lot of times what they do is they won't say anything about their PTSD. They won't say anything about their anxiety and their depression. They suck it up. And then they show up on my doorstep.
Right.
And then
Which
we
in case
deal